tried to sign up and couldn't. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And those of you, Donna and Tracy, who were here last time, I don't know if you remember, we started with a grounding technique, just kind of checking in with yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit more about grounding today, but we're going to start with kind of a similar technique. Americo, if you're driving, do not do this grounding technique if you're in a car somewhere. So this will not be good for you. Or we got Heather who just joined us. So we're gonna have you start and it's just gonna take 30 seconds. And what I want you to do is just, you can shut off your camera if it feels a little bit too strange to do, but we're a small group, so it should be okay. But what I want you to do is take about 30 seconds and just look around the room and notice things that are there, and just notice see what's behind you, and just do that for 30 seconds. Maybe if you can like feel your fabric or pick up an object or something on your desk, but just spend 30 seconds noticing what's around you. Okay, that felt like a long time, didn't it? It was 30 seconds. Um, Before I kind of talk about grounding a little bit, or maybe some you guys know really what grounding is intended to do, I would love to know what that was like for you. And if you were like, it was weird and there was nothing, you can say that too.
I'm working out of my kitchen and I just realized like this is the main artery of my house. Like there are kids' shoes, there are bananas, there's a water bottle, I have a blow up globe beach ball. Like I always want my kitchen to be really nice and clean and tidy, but it's impossible. This is where we live.
Yeah, okay, good. The blow up ball, that's hilarious. So it's this, have you guys heard of the term grounding before? People talk about it a lot. Sometimes the first time I heard about it, when we talked last time, when I said I'm a skeptic at heart, I can remember the first time I heard about grounding. And when it was Gwyneth Paltrow was talking about it, probably 10 or 12 years ago, and talking about walking around in the grass barefoot. And I was like, whatever, lady. I just dismissed it. But what I have learned since then is grounding is really a way to help us. And there's a couple ways to do it. We can do it physically or psychologically. And what we just did was like psychological grounding. And what's happening, the reason that it works is because in our brains, all of the stress, the rumination, the worry, thinking about the things we have to do before or things we have to do after, that sort of thing, it puts us in the threat state in our brain. And even though don't have lions chasing us, that's how our brain interprets it, is there's something trying to eat me and I am in danger. And so we live in that stress state. And so if you can learn a few of these grounding techniques in that 30 seconds of just stopping what you're thinking about, looking around and noticing what's around you, helps tell your brain, I am safe right now and I'm okay. And I don't have to be in this stress state. And sometimes even just that 30 seconds works. Now, the physical grounding part of it, there's actually more science behind it around the electrons in the earth with the negative charge on the earth, and standing, like connecting to the earth with your bare feet or with your hands on like a tree trunk, tree huggers, can actually really help change those electrical currents that are happening inside of you, which is those electrical pulses. It's how our brain talks to our organs. Some people, I just got on board maybe 6 or 8 months ago and bought actual grounding sheets that you plug into the ground wire at your house, and I have never slept better. The first 3 nights were terrible. I slept terrible, but I travel with my grounding sheet now because this grounding technique, whether you do it physically, psychologically, is super important to kind of get your body and your brain out of that fight or flight state. So knowing that technique when you're sitting there really stressed, taking that 30 seconds to just do something a little bit different and really pay attention to what's going on around me can be super effective. And hi, Heather, thanks for joining us. All right, I am going to share my screen here. And so we can go through, I have a few slides. Um, and so I just want to ask, there were a couple of you here last time. Did you try to do the assignments? These were the assignments we had for last time. Did you try to do them throughout the week? And how did that work for you?
Uh, Just being intentional, like writing down what I'm not going to do, has been really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. It is just a way to continue to come back to paying attention to where is my brain at in that, am I in that fight or flight state, or am I able to kind of respond pretty well? And so if we think about well-being, and if you guys would talk just a little bit about like, what does well-being mean to you? Anyone want to share?
I guess for me, it means being, if being happy, it's a sense of peacefulness, happiness, um, away from everyday stress.
Yeah, away from that everyday stress. Yeah.
I don't think I really thought about it until I really realized I didn't have it, right? Like overstressed, not eating well, just not feeling great, not sleeping well. And then like over time, deliberately like making time to exercise, being intentional about sleep, eating better. You're like, wow, I feel so much better, right? And that sense of well-being. I mean, it's so obvious, but you get caught up in the day to day. At least I do.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
is, it's a great point. It's one of those things we don't think about until we don't have it. And then, and I think oftentimes we live in this state. Work has just become this place for us where we feel like what we're feeling inside is just normal. It's just a normal way of thinking. It's kind of like I did a Whole 30. Are you guys familiar with what a Whole 30 is? It's where you basically strip out everything, gluten, dairy. You eat basically like vegetables and proteins and some nuts for like 30 days. And then you reintroduce foods. And I reintroduced dairy, and I was like, oh, my gut does not like dairy, even though I love cheese. And I realized this whole time, I just felt like this is what it felt like when you eat, right? Like this is how you, and I think we've done the same thing with the way that we work is we just think this is how it just feels to be human. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can really start to learn some of these practices that'll help us feel quite a bit differently if we can get good at them and if we can get consistent at them. So this, I don't know why it is not letting me. Oh, shoot. Stop share. Last time this worked great. I don't know what's going on with me. Can you guys see this?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
So this little guy, have you guys ever seen this picture before?
No.
Do you ever feel like him? Yes, like just hanging on by a thread. This is how a lot of us go through life constantly thinking about this. And it's really interesting. Um, that I had a conversation yesterday with somebody, and it was a business owner, and she said her team was really struggling, and they were constantly saying we need, this certain group was saying we need more employees, we need more employees, which if Tracy has worked in HR, she knows people are always asking for more people. If you've led people at all, people are always asking for more people. And the interesting thing she said is they aren't working nights, they aren't working more than 40, 42 hours a week, they aren't working weekends. And so burnout can exist if our brains are constantly in that stress state, even if we're only working a 35, 40, 42 hour work week. It doesn't take a 60-hour work week to feel like this guy right here. It can happen just because our brains aren't operating in a way that's effective for us. And that's what we really need to address. So if you think about, I want you to take a couple minutes and just think about this yourself. Really, kind of that last question is, what do you struggle with yourself in terms of your own well-being and balance? What parts of it are difficult for you? Just to start to get, and you don't have to share, just to start to get a sense of what's really happening there. You guys all have a chance to think about that. Yeah, and a lot of times what I have found with clients, what I found with myself is it's not necessary. We feel like it's the to-do list and all of the things that have to get done and how we're taking care of everyone else. And those are important. But what really causes that burnout and overwhelm is the story that we are telling ourselves about those things and the way that we're thinking about them. And we can change that narrative. We can change that story if we can start to really think about that. And so you'll remember last time we talked about building this, my kind of what I talk about is the well-being trifecta. So first you've got to build agency. If you remember, we talked about the captain, like a captain of a ship who has agency through a storm. It had two things, right? He had skills and he had a really good vessel. His boat was like, could handle it. And for those of you who weren't here, I was in a terrible storm once with a captain who was um, awesome, who like handled it very, very well. And so, and then the second part is really understanding that learning process, the inquire, learn, and do piece. And we're going to go through that a little bit more specifically. And then really the third piece is that skill development, really creating these habits and routines instead of just saying we want to feel better. How are we really going about our well-being in a way that is really creating some skills that we can use and we're intentional about it? Intentional and consistency are the two things that are really going to help you make progress there. So remember, this is the learning path that we talked about, this inquire, learn, and do. And it's super, this, I did not make this up. I simplified it for clients, but it's based on the work, as I told you, of David Kolb, who's an expert in experiential learning. He works in the education sector. And then they've also found that the way that our brain operates is also in that, actually like physically, this cyclical pattern in the way that we learn. It follows this pattern. And so we want the reason it's important to remember this is because you want to work with your brain, not against it, as you're trying to think about how am I learning here and how am I going forward? And we often forget this initial piece, that inquire piece. We just jump right to like learning something new or doing something new. But skipping that inquire piece is like a dandelion. And if you give me just a minute, do you guys have dandelions in your yards? Have you ever tried to remove them? Tracy's like, I don't have any. Somebody in your family is all over it.
I married a North Dakota farm boy. Like I have the nicest lawn in the entire city. It's true. It's true.
That's awesome. Well, you're very lucky. If you could send them over to my house, that would be great. Um, so a dandelion they're annoying in your yard. And if you're in a hurry and you want to get rid of them, you go and you pluck them off, right? But I don't know if you've ever tried to pull out a dandelion. Its root is really, really, really deep and really, really strong. So you get rid of it for a while and your lawn looks good and then you're happy. And then when the conditions are right or maybe wrong, however you want to define it, that dandelion comes back. And so if you really want to get rid of it, you've got to go to the garage, or if you don't have the tool, go to the hardware store, get this special tool, dig in, pull the root out and get it so that it doesn't come back. And that's what the inquiry step does, is it really helps us deepen that understanding instead of putting a band-aid on. So if I just teach you a bunch of grounding techniques, but you don't really figure out what is at the root of what's going on with me, it will be helpful for a while until you get into another tough condition and you're not able to manage it. So that inquiry, that digging deep into understanding the root of that is essential for long-term well-being and that sustained well-being that we're all looking for. So this is kind of the process that I created in my book is called the 5 inquiries. And it is really these 5 questions that you have to ask yourself and truly understand in order to be truly well, to have this well-being. You've got to be able to understand all 5 of these things. We obviously don't have time to go through all 5 of them today. So we're going to go through this one pretty briefly. But you'll get a good sense of how you can work with this and some things that you can do. And it follows this path, this inquire, how do I ask this question to understand? How do I learn about these different themes, these different topics? And how do I learn some skills and then actually practice them and do them? So we'll go through this first kind of discover phase that we're talking about with that question, what do I believe? And this is my favorite little um, this is the way I think about thoughts and emotions. Thoughts and emotions, like the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. When they were like, when Dorothy was frightened by them, is really thinking about thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. A lot of us spend our lives trying to push them aside and not think about them and not pay attention to them. And because we've got to keep our stuff together, right? For our families, for our work, for all that kind of everything that's going on in our life. And sometimes it's just not fun to listen to even think about. I had a client one time where he brought something came up and I said, hey, let's explore that a little bit. What would you think about exploring that? And he goes, no. I'm just going to push that down and let it turn into cancer, Kara. I don't want to deal with it. So, but knowing those thoughts, emotions, and beliefs and how they impact us is going to be really, really important. And knowing that our brain is hardwired, we've got to remember that it's going to be really difficult for us to work against those things. So one of the ways that you can do this, and we're going to go through a quick case study, is in America, I think I maybe used this case study with your group a little bit ago, maybe a month or so ago when you were in that group. But what you want to really think and start this inquiry phase is really thinking about what thoughts or beliefs do I have? That question, what do I believe? And then the way that you work through this is what are the facts, what actions or words of the other person or the situation are actually can confirm this, and what are facts against that thought or belief that I have made up in my head. And we're going to talk about how the brain does that in just a little bit. So as we think about this, as we go into how our brain works, I want you each to think about what is one belief that you have. I'm going to give you a minute or two to think about this that's been on repeat lately. It can about you personally, right? This can be something like that imposter syndrome. I'm terrible at my job. Or for me, I just have this book coming out every now and then. I'm like, oh my gosh, my book is horrible. Nobody's ever going to read this thing and it's terrible. But I just like that loop keeps going, right? So think about what's one belief that you have about yourself that is on loop. What's one belief you hold about another person? And then identify some thoughts or emotions you have around those beliefs. You will not be required to share. I know this is very personal. Are those easy to identify? Yeah, I had the last time I taught this to a group of people. You may have seen, I just posted this little thing on um, LinkedIn. It was so funny because one of the participants, he said, man, I thought this was only me. And I was like, oh no, it's not you. And so I said, what are some of the things that your like story is telling you? And he's like, I can't say those out loud. I'll get fired. And so we have those things going on in our brain. Was anyone not able to identify them? Sometimes we can't see them because it's like we've done such a good job of pushing them down. But I haven't run into anybody who has never had any of these, right? We all have them, some in varying degrees. But it is important that you start to pay attention to, what do I believe? What story am I telling myself? And that's when we get to the learn piece. So we're going to talk about that a little bit next. So we've done that inquiry, started to think about, what do I believe? What are those beliefs that are happening? And then how can I learn something new? And one of the skills that I talk about, self-awareness as a skill, is one of the ways you can really get to understanding those belief systems. And the thing you have to remember is your brain is a storyteller, and it creates stories for two reasons. It wants to work really fast, and it needs to keep you safe. That is the brain's only job. Keep you safe, keep you alive, and it needs to work quickly because there are so many things happening. It's getting so much information at one time, like millions of pieces of information at a time, that it has to sort through and filter out and decide what to pay attention to. So it's really based on efficiency. The second thing about your brain that you want to remember is those neural pathways. So those neural pathways are just like any other road, right? And you go down a road or you go down a path over and over and over again, and it gets well worn. And so your brain will constantly tell yourself those facts, will see those things that support your beliefs, because it's way easier than looking for something different. And there are there's a lot of things working against you, but there are two really important ways that the brain works in this way to protect you. And it's there to protect you and to help you think really quickly, but it's really important to know about them. One is the confirmation bias. I talk about this like your Instagram algorithm. And so, like once you click on cute dogs, then like one cute dog um, post, then you'll constantly start getting them, and it'll filter out anything else. For me, it filters out cats because I do not like cats. I'm sorry if you like cats. I had a bad experience when I was 12 and I just can't get over it. So I should probably do some beliefs on like, why do I hate kittens so much? Maybe that'll be my next. I got other things to work on before that. But it's just like that algorithm. So once you believe something, your brain is going to pay attention to any information that confirms that confirmation bias, and it will actively filter out information that does not confirm what you already believe. Then, even if you can get past the confirmation bias, there's another hurdle you have to pass, and that's cognitive dissonance. So your brain does not like two things that don't align. Your brain wants information to align. And so what it will do is, if you have a belief and you act in a different way, your brain will make up a story to put those two things in alignment. And so one of the ways that you can see this is if you feel like somebody is a terrible person, right? You believe that somebody is a horrible person, and then you see them doing something nice for someone, and your brain will say, "Oh yeah, that's a one-off. That doesn't really explain who they are." We see this right now happening in our politics that is going on right now. So some people who maybe voted for the administration that's in right now, I don't want to turn this political, but who doesn't agree with some of the things that are happening, they find a way to say, oh, well, that's false news. That's fake news. That's not really true, because I've got to bring these two things. I voted for this administration and support it, but I don't like these certain things that they're doing. How do I bring those into balance? I've got to find a way to do that. So you have to understand both of these things to really be able to think differently and understand what the truth is. How do I build that self-awareness? Does that make sense? You guys didn't know you were going to get a science lesson today, did you? Okay. And so one of the things, not only do we tell stories about other people, But as we talked about just a couple slides ago, we tell stories about ourselves. And there is this voice inside of us. Have you guys heard of this, the inner critic? People will talk about this voice a lot. When I did my coach training, they called it the saboteur. Some people call it your gremlin. There are different words for it, but most psychology, or some people talk about the shadow. Um, any kind of psychology or coaches will talk about this voice that's going on inside of you. There's a book called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and he calls it the maniac in your head. And he also calls it like your inner roommate. But there is this voice that's constantly chattering in the background. And so I want you to think, if you can identify with that just for a minute, and just think a little bit about, what is your inner critic saying these days? Whose voice does it remind you of? And what would you name it if you could? And anyone who wants to share, you don't have to share if you don't want to, but if anyone would like to share, that would be awesome.
I can't remember what I named it, but it's essentially the not good enough, right? Like the whatever I'm doing or saying or offering is just not good enough. Others could do it better.
Super common one. It's really common, which is funny for people to have the like, I'm not enough and I'm
Mhm.
too much all at the same time.
Yeah.
So sometimes those two go together, which feels like they shouldn't, but they do. That I'm not good enough is a super common one. Anyone else?
I can go. I would say mine is, I think I shared with you last week that I'm out of work, and I would say mine is, I've got to get back to work, right? Like taking 9 months off is just too long, which it's not, by the way. Like it's okay to take a hot second in life, but like I've worked for 20 years, right? And so my inner critic just keeps saying, get back to work, Tracy. Just take anything. You need a paycheck. And it's my own voice, but my own like snarky, sarcastic voice. But I don't know what I would name it,
Oh, I want you to think about that this week.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, some people, I usually have my clients, I should keep a running list because I have people name them, and sometimes they name them like someone from their past, or somebody, who maybe hasn't been super nice to them. Sometimes they come up with super funny names for them. I name mine Claire because I feel like Claire is the name of somebody who's probably a friend who's like has good intent and wants to help you, but she's just really super annoying. And so, like, this inner critic is actually trying to help you, which we talk about in phase two. We're not going to talk about today because that's kind of the second phase, the second question that we talk about. But that inner critic is here to help you, it serves a purpose. And so, understanding that voice and being able to recognize it when it comes is really important. And the reason naming it is important is because it's essential to start to understand that that voice is not you. We feel like I can remember a conversation I had with my first coach when I was probably 32 years old. And I was like, no, you're wrong. Like, that is exactly, I do suck at my job. I'm horrible. And I can remember specifically arguing with him about this and really believing that voice and not being able to separate myself from it. And so being able to separate yourself from that voice and realize, hey, these are just thoughts that are happening in my head, but these are not me, is important. And so giving it a name can kind of have you identify it as someone else rather than, this is the true Kara who's saying this. And she's actually like relevant and knows what she's saying. So think about, if you can think about a name for your inner critic this week, that would be awesome. And then when she shows up, I'm like, there you are, Claire. What are you doing here today? what's your function right now? What are you trying to help me with? And it just really helps kind of that separation piece. So I think about self-awareness as that pause between the stimulus and the story. So something happens and we tell ourselves a story about it, and then we make some kind of judgment about it and we run with it. So that pause, that self-awareness, what we're really trying to do is create that space between something that happens to us and the belief or the story that we create. It's not super easy. But if we go back to thinking about the brain as a storyteller and that we want to create self-awareness in order to combat those quick pathways that our brain is using, there's a couple things that we can do to create that self-awareness. One is curiosity. How do we get really super curious about things? Instead of just believing these beliefs, my boss wants to fire me. How do I get really curious about that and open? And then how do we get feedback from other people? Because we have blind spots that we can't see, and other people can point those out to us, people who we trust and who know are there to help us and have the best intentions. So we're going to talk a little. First, I'm curious. Is this what is this? Does this feel like it makes sense to you guys? Or any questions about that? Kind of how we put that together, that self-awareness? No.
Yeah, I think just identifying it and naming it is really helpful.
Yeah. That was a game changer for me once I named Claire. I kind of stole it because I also had a drain in one time from a surgery, and it had to be in for way longer than it needed to be, like 5 weeks, which is it got me in the ER one time because it was like sucking back into my body. It was horrible. And I really wanted to take her out, and the ER doc wanted to take it out. It was 2 a.m. and he called my doctor who I'd had the surgery, and they're like, nope, leave it in. Because it was still pulling fluid out, right? So it needed to be there. And so I named my drain Claire. And so, because I'm like, she's there to protect me, she's there to help me, but she's really, really annoying. And so I stole that name. I use that name for anything that is there to help me and protect me, but is also very annoying to me. So it helps me in a lot of situations. So once we learn that, once we understand, learn about, like in this example, self-awareness, how our brain is operating, then it's time for us to do something different, to practice different ways of being or different ways of interacting with that inner critic or our thoughts. And so when we think about curiosity, this is one of the processes that you want to think through, is just welcoming those thoughts. Don't push them away. When we have those thoughts, we often will just try to push them out so we don't have to think about them. We have a lot going on. And so we can't always just stop and get out our journal or lay down on the kitchen floor and cry, um, which I did 2 days ago. So stuff going on with my family, but we don't always have the time for that. I'll talk about that in a second. So you want to welcome that thought, understand that, and get curious. Like, what is really happening right now? Why did this thought come into my brain? What triggered it? Is it helping to give me some false sense of control by trying to control the narrative or control a situation? Is it trying to keep me safe, to protect me? That procrastination or perfectionism, those are usually things that are trying to protect you, because somewhere you learned a long time ago, I've got to be perfect for people to accept me, to not reject me, to not make fun of me. And so that perfectionism is actually trying to protect you from something that you don't need protection from anymore. Is it trying to help me make sense of something, to problem solve? Is it fact, or am I making this up? You will start to notice, if you start to think about these stories, um, you'll start to notice places where people tell these stories in their heads. We do it all the time. And I am very aware of this. I'm talking to you guys about it. I've researched it. And just yesterday on a call, somebody said to me, hey, that's a story you're making up about this person. I was talking about, I hadn't heard back from this client for a week. And I was talking to one of my business partners, and they were like, I said, oh, I think he ghosted me. And he's like, you're making that up. You have no idea. And I said, oh, yeah, you're right. So really starting to notice those stories, those beliefs. And then you have a decision to make, and it has to do with donuts. And so I like to use this analogy because it helps. A lot of times people will talk about, oh, if you notice your thoughts, just let them pass by you, like a cloud passes by you, or like a wave coming and going. Have you guys heard people explain it like this before? Both of those things are pretty common analogies for people to use. But if you think about it like a donut, like your thoughts, um, when somebody buys donuts and they bring them, they're on the counter or they're at work somewhere, and you have to walk past that donut and decide, do I want to eat this thing or not? Sometimes you have to decide like 14 times a day because you keep walking past it and you keep grabbing for it. But you have to decide over and over again, no, I'm not gonna eat that donut. And just like we are what we eat, right? So that donut, we get to decide, do we eat that and make it a part of us? Our thoughts are the same way. They're just another noun out in this world. It's just a thing that came into our head, and we're humans, so our brains act funky. We have weird thoughts all the time. And then we get to decide, do I want this thought to become a part of me? Am I going to accept it as truth and just let it influence me, or am I going to let that thing pass me by? And sometimes it'll feel like a factory of donuts, like a conveyor belt coming at you constantly. Like your thoughts will do that, and you have to intentionally choose over and over again, hey, I decided not to believe that. Hey, I decided to let that go. And that neural pathway is going to eventually start to change, but it will take some time. Okay, this is a little bit crazy and a little bit out there, so I'm curious about how you guys are feeling about this, welcoming your thoughts and getting curious.
So not about me, but my very best friend is like type A anal perfectionist 100% of the time. And you just can't live your life like that. She is just stressed out to the max all the time with, do I look 100% put together? What does my husband look like? Is my house messy? What's going on at work? And it's so interesting, because I met her, like, later in her life, and last summer, her mom came up from Florida to watch her son, and she is her mom's daughter. Her mom acted the exact same way, and literally, the sentences and how she spoke to herself and how she was, like, trying to clean up the house, and I was like, it's so interesting to that, like, some of these things you are learned as a small child and you just don't realize. Like,
Yes.
I can say over and over, like, "Kelly, calm down, like, the train has left the station, as long as you have 80% of what you need, like, you're fine," right? But she just cannot unless things are, like, 100% perfect, so it just really got me thinking of, so I wrote down, like, you said things like, "Be intentional, you have to make the same decision over and over," like, she just needs to be really, I can counsel her on this, right? Of, like, you can say over and over again that, "It's okay that my house is at 50%," or, "It's okay that in my wheel of life, 2 out of 4 things are perfect and 2 are at 50%, right?" But I think it will
Yeah.
take her a little bit to get there, but it was so interesting of what are some things that you are learned or taught, like, as a young age that you take along with you?
Look at you, Tracy. That's step two.
Oh,
You were my advanced student.
wow. I really should work on myself first, that's why I'm here, but it just, like, triggered that for me.
No, it's so true. And that is actually such an excellent point, is we can often see this in other people and we can't see it in ourselves, which is why we need to get curious and why we need to get feedback from other people. And Tracy and I live in a state called Minnesota Nice, but what it really means is Minnesota passive aggressive. Like people just aren't on it. It was crazy for me, even moving here from Iowa. People were like, you're so direct, and I'm like, you're so never telling the truth. It's so interesting. So getting that feedback is sometimes hard. So you've got to have some friends who can really help you with that, and then also be willing to be curious and challenge some of those beliefs. It's kind of the story I was telling you guys yesterday, or that happened a couple days ago, is um, I'm struggling with something in my family right now. And I just was like cooking dinner and just had a moment where I just needed to cry. And normally, a few years ago, I would have, because I'm just like, no, I'm strong German Capricorn. I'm going to get this done. I don't have time for this. But I just decided I'm just going to welcome this emotion. I'm going to welcome it in. And I just didn't tell myself all these stories about it, where normally I would have said, she believes this about you. How can you do this? Blah, blah. All of these things would have been going on in my head, but instead I just let it go through me. And the experience was very, very different because I had a good cry literally on the kitchen floor. I was like, I got to move out of the way of the window. I live in South Minneapolis where the houses are close together. My neighbor might see me. Um, but then it was done with, right? And I let that move through me. I was curious about it. I was understanding what is happening here. And then I was able to move from it instead of pushing it down and then having it still fester there. So really being able to welcome those thoughts, welcome those emotions, understand them, know that you're not going to feel that way forever. Because when you're in the middle of something like that, it can feel like this is never going to get better. And let it move through you is really important. It's a great skill to have. It takes a while to develop it. This does not happen overnight for me. All right. So one of the things, let me check on time here. One of the things that can really help with this self-awareness and creating that pause between what happens and the story you're telling about it is your breath. And your breath is free. It's accessible at all times for you. And it is something that oh yeah, Donna just chatted. She has to leave. Okay. But it is something that you have all the time with you. And so there's this thing called the physiological side. Does anyone listen to Andrew Huberman podcast? He talks about this all the time. So this type of breath has actually been around for hundreds, probably thousands of years in yogi cultures. But they have real research behind it now out of Stanford that shows that even one of these breaths can pull you out of your fight or flight system into your rest and relax with one breath. They have science behind it out of Stanford. Like it's a real thing. And so what this looks like is it's one big breath through your nose into your diaphragm, which it matters whether it goes into your diaphragm or into your chest. And then one additional small breath in through your nose, and then a really, really long exhale through your mouth with an audible sigh, if that's possible, if you're not in front of people. So it looks kind of like this. You let that long, long exhale, that longer exhale than inhale is really, really important. And so this kind of breath it has been shown to, in those moments when you're really stressed out, help you even in that moment. It also, if you do it proactively, like 3 to 5 minutes each morning, can protect you throughout the day from getting into that stress state. So it's another great practice something you can do. Take 2 minutes in the morning, check in with where you are. Did I wake up with a bunch of anxiety? I'm just going to breathe for 2 minutes, get myself centered for the day before you jump up, look at your phone, and get on with your day. It's really, really quick. And it works. It's very effective. And then this quick technique that you can use is if you connect that breath. Let's say you're in a really stressful situation with somebody, and you connect that breath with a couple of other things. Is the affirm, this BAM technique I talk about. That affirm is just remind yourself who you are and who you want to be, how you want to show up in this moment. Get yourself back centered to you, back grounded into who you are and who you want to be in this moment, and then move or stretch, do something quick, get up and do 10 jumping jacks or 20. The best way to do this, if you're at a desk and you can't get up and do jumping jacks in front of somebody, but they're really annoying you or they're really making you angry, that move piece there's some energy you need to move through your body. And so what you can do, what I do this all the time, is I'll either clench my fists under the table and then let them go, or clench like my butt or my quads or something just to create some tension there, and then just release them to let that go. Because when you've got that going on inside your body, that is some energy, just like a toddler throws a temper tantrum and like yells and screams and flails around. when there's that frustration in you, there's some energy that needs to be released. And so this is a way that you can do that. That breath, who do I want to be in this moment? And then how do I get that energy, that movement relaxed out of there? Does that make sense? Good. Okay, so we're going to close here in just a minute, but I do want to give you a couple of assignments, and I will send these out to you. Is choose a breath practice. There's a lot of different breath practices, so if you have one you like, you can look other ones up if you want, or you can do that physiological sigh, which is my favorite, for relaxation. I use a different one for energy, but choose a breath practice for 2 to 3 minutes each morning before you get out of bed and before you look at your phone. Do not look at your phone first thing in the morning. Even if you can wait like 10 minutes, it will do a lot of good for your brain to not just wake up and open up that phone. And then ask yourself some of these journal questions. Find 15 or 20 minutes and sit down and just think through and write out, what does my inner critic say to me at my worst times? And then what's one thing I'm ready to stop believing, even just a little bit, even if I think that it's true, but I don't want it to be a part of my life anymore. What is one thing I'm ready to just stop believing? And what would my life look like? What would my daily life, how would that be different if I didn't have that belief in my head, if I didn't run around thinking about that all the time? And you want to be really specific there and really identifying, how is this belief impacting me, my relationships with other people, my relationship with myself, my work, my family? Because usually those beliefs are running the show and we don't even know it. And so you want to get really clear on how would my life be different if I did not have that belief in my head? Everybody got it? All right. You survived another session. Another another brain lesson on how to get yourself out of fight or flight. What questions do you guys have, or things you want to share, insights you had?
You mentioned a book called Untethered Soul, maybe? And who was the author?
His name is Michael Singer.
Michael Singer. Okay.
It's a super heavy book.
Okay.
It took me about, I took it to Portugal with me the first time I went to Portugal. And just so whenever I think about it, I think of being in Portugal. And I had to read it really slowly because it's super heavy, but it's really, really interesting
Okay.
and really helps think through that. How do you separate yourself from your thoughts? I had a leader one time who said, you're not responsible for your first thought, because our brains work crazy. Do you guys sometimes get these weird things in your head and you're like, where did that thought come from? So our brains operate weird. So you're not responsible for your first thought. You are responsible for your second thought and your first action. And
Mm.
and so that book really helps you separate out your thoughts your from your, who you are at your core. Anything else?
Just sort of an awareness moment. This is helpful. Thank you. I had a moment last week. Just, you sort of, as you said, like wake up and tense and oh my God, like my shoulders are at my ears and I just couldn't. And it did some of those breathing exercises and just, it wasn't maybe more than 10 minutes or so. I needed a little more time than 2 minutes. But just that act, I mean, and then I journaled for a few minutes and I was like, oh my God, that really helped. It really got me out of my head and just into a place where I could actually function. It's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's that morning routine. I'm sure you've maybe heard people talk about like having a morning routine it has probably been the single thing that has changed my life the most and even if it's only short, like you said, like a 10-minute, 5-10 minutes, I find something to ground myself, center myself every single morning.
Yeah.
And it's probably been if I could wave my magic wand for people, I would have them do that. Find a routine in the morning that centers you.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you guys for joining so much. Um, and then Heather is actually our speaker next week. Heather has just written a book about, Tracy, you'll love this, about moms in the workplace. And I I know. And it's real how we can support moms better. And it so if you have any mom friends out there who are in the workplace and struggling, Tracy, have them come along. She is Heather is an expert in that space and really how do we support moms in the workplace? How do moms find support themselves in the workplace? And a lot of what she teaches doesn't have to do just with moms, but just being humans as well. Yeah, and how do you work? So she's going to share some of that with us next week.
Excited.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming. Have a really good day. Remember to check in with yourself. Look around so your brain doesn't know so your brain doesn't think a lion's trying to eat you today. All
Thank you,
right, have an
Sarah. Have a
awesome
good day,
afternoon.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye.